Greetings, hello, good day, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining True Hope Cast, the official podcast of True Hope Canada. True Hope Cast takes a deep dive into mental health's many psychological and physiological aspects. This is the show for you if you're looking for motivation, inspiration, knowledge, and solutions. And that really is what we're all about here at True Hope Canada. True Hope Canada is a mind and body-based supplement company that is dedicated first and foremost to promoting brain and body health through non-invasive nutritional means. For more information about us, you can visit truehopecanada.com. Today, I welcome Lindsay Miller to the podcast. Now, Lindsay Miller hosts the Stress Nanny Podcast and is the enthusiastic founder of the stressnanny.com. Her goal at the Stress Nanny is to give parents and kids simple ways to communicate their needs during everyday moments and in stressful situations like family conflict, divorce, illness, infertility, loss. Lindsay believes that mindful communication is an essential skill for modern families. Today, we're going to be discussing mindfulness tools to help you and your kids worry less and play more. Enjoy the show. All right, Lindsay, welcome to True Hope Cast. Thanks for being here. Appreciate your time. How are you? What is going well?
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me, Simon. I'm so excited to be here. I am Lindsay, and I host the Stress Nanny Podcast and the Stress Nanny website, and I coach kids in mindfulness. And what's going well right now is so many people in the world are choosing mindfulness as an intervention for kids. And it's so encouraging because mindfulness is a simple intervention that has a big impact.
Wonderful. First of all, I've got to know, what is a stress nanny?
It's a good question. So a stress nanny is someone who helps you or family keep an eye on stress levels. Just like a regular nanny helps you keep an eye on your kids and get them where they need to be, a stress nanny helps you keep an eye on development and helps your kids get where they need to be developmentally without letting stress derail them. So anytime families have things come up that are stressful, I provide them with mindfulness-based and research-based tools to move through that stress in a way that honors development and helps families and kids thrive.
Do you do that like in person? Do you go to people's homes, or is this like an online thing?
You know, it's a good question. I have worked in families' homes, but mostly it's virtual. So I work with kids on Zoom. I meet with them for 30 minutes once a week, and we connect around fun activities and stories that are mindfulness related.
What age are these kids?
I have kids anywhere from 7 to 16 that I work with, but there are so many things parents can do for a younger age range and an older age range. But the kids that I work with, yeah, they're generally elementary, middle, and early high schoolers.
Do you also work with like parents of like younger kids? Because obviously, there's a certain young age group where it'd be quite difficult for them to sit down on a Zoom call and have the communication to be able to, talk and listen, etc. A 3-year-old boy, for example, like my son, I think he'd ask you the same question a million times. He'd love it, but I don't think it would be super beneficial in regards to the stress piece. But do you work with the parents for those younger kids?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely can. I teach also a mindfulness class for adults. So a lot of times the parents who are interested in implementing mindfulness-based interventions for younger kids will come to my mindfulness and meditation class for adults. We'll talk through and problem solve there. But yeah, I also do individual coaching with adults to help them troubleshoot, problem solve. Mostly at that age, what it looks like is helping them understand the ways that sensory development promote mindfulness and a sense of presence for kids. And a lot of times with little kids, there are already so many things that they're doing where they're fully present and we interrupt them. So sometimes with parents of younger kids, it's a function of helping them recognize when their child is already being mindful and encouraging them to not interrupt.
Yeah, that non-interruption piece is interesting, especially for parents. I was listening to a Jordan Peterson podcast a couple of days ago, actually, and he's talking about how most people are having kids like later on in their lives now, when they're in their 30s, where they might have a bit more money, more resources, more time to spend with the kids, attempting to fill their schedules of stuff to do, and therefore not really allowing them to go and play. And how did he put it? He's like, and then those younger parents, like in their 20s, they're still kind of very much rooted in their teenage behavioral habits. So they're, not quite so, I don't want to say not quite so adult, but they basically aren't really adults yet, I suppose. You could argue the other way, I suppose. But he's saying that those younger parents are more helpfully neglectful. in regards to they want to continue doing all the things that they've been doing in their like, they've only just had their like adult independence, so they want to continue doing all those things. So they're like a little bit more neglectful in a very helpful way for their kids, so like the kids learn to like play on their own and do these other things. So that must be an interesting part of like the kids that you work with, and the parents and the experiences that they've had growing up already.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely is. And there are some kids who were exposed to mindfulness, when they were little, but most of the time people who are parenting right now, mindfulness is a novel concept to them and they're not as familiar with it. But you're totally correct in that there are big generational differences in the way we interact with our kids and in the knowledge we have around mindfulness and what is and isn't supportive to development. And it's really interesting to try to communicate and like work with all the different types of parents that are out there, right? Because we're all different in our own way when it comes to parenting, but mindfulness is something we can all implement in our own, in our own families, in our own way, in a way that works for us. And it's one of the reasons I think it's such a fantastic intervention and a place families should kind of start when they're looking for like something to help them manage stress. Like start with mindfulness because it is so flexible. It can look so many different ways in family life and it's super easy to implement.
Do you think that we, just as a culture, like obviously we have our biological evolution, which works a lot slower than our cultural evolution. Do you think we've just forgotten how to be mindful, or we've forgotten the practices that allow us to be a bit more present and aware? Because I imagine that there was a period in human history where we probably might not have needed a mindful coach because it was much more of like an everyday normal biological thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that the pace of modern living definitely is something that invites us to kind of recall some of those earlier relaxation skills that we have, right, as part of our DNA. Like there was a time when relaxation was something we continually practiced and was built in. If we were in, a more privileged sector of society, that was the case for us. But the pace of life has gotten to the point where it's kind of like our brains aren't sure what to do. There's so much information coming in, and our brains are, like you said, catching up from an evolutionary perspective to process this much information. And I think sometimes the result is that they feel like we need to be like going, like getting all the info all the time, doing something all the time. And it's learning to filter that. So I feel like in some ways mindfulness is a skill that it is crucial for common living, no matter what, because of the sheer quantity of information that's coming our way. We have to have a filter. Like we have to be able to sift through the thoughts in our brain and choose the ones to act on instead of just like coming with, going with whatever thought makes its way to the front. So in that way, it's a skill that is modern. But in other ways, in terms of just being present and relaxing and being more meditative or just having a lot of calming influences in our day, I think there are definitely claims you could make that that's something we've maybe forgotten or that's gotten left behind as society has evolved so quickly over the last, 20 years.
Certainly, and I'm sure most people agree with me here that most adults, parents are quite stressed out in regards to not just like the standard things that we need to take care of, if like working and money and bills and stuff like that, but we obviously have the constant external stimuli coming in from all over the place that in so many cases we can't control. A lot of it's quite addicting, so it can be very hard to even control the management of those things. But what about kids? Are kids like, do you think kids are more stressed out now, and what's the primary root of that? I'm going to stop at that because I had about 4 questions to add on to that question, so I'll stop there.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think you're right that there's, again, so much information. And I think sometimes with kids, what we're seeing like overwhelm. I'm seeing a lot of emotional overwhelm. And so because there's so many things flying at us all the time, our systems are running at like such a high pace that we're hitting overwhelm frequently, right? And kids don't know what to do with like all the emotional data that's getting kicked up, right? Like social referencing, especially with teenagers, like the amount of social referencing they're able to do now versus kind of what we did when I was a kid, it's massive, right? Like what they're aware of, what they have to filter and process. And so for teenagers, I would say the biggest stress is being able to filter out what's important to them and then being able to connect in meaningful ways. So being able to kind of monitor the activities that are available to them and then zero in on the ones that are important for them to be a part of, and then focus on the ways those are meaningful so that they can kind of ground in themselves, right? And they're not kind of awash in all the things they're missing out on, or all the things they could be doing that aren't doing, or all the things they aren't doing well enough. Like they're grounded in the things that are important to them. And then for little kids, yeah, I think the primary stressor that comes with emotion is in the way that we talk about it. Like emotion itself is not a problem, right? We've had emotion for ages. But if we can learn to think of emotion as information and teach kids that it's information, we can teach them to be problem solvers and know what to do with it, right? But a lot of times what happens is we as parents, we weren't taught that emotion was information. We were punished for emotion. It was kind of just something that was a hazard or nuisance as part of our day, and we didn't use it as information. And so for kids, what's stressful is that they're living in a time and in a place where emotion is high. Like we are, especially with the pandemic, right? Like post-pandemic living, everyone's running with pretty high emotion. If they're not literate in emotion, they're drowning in it. And as parents, it's really hard because if we haven't been taught the skills, we're trying to like scurry and learn how to manage emotion and then teach our kids while we're trying to do it simultaneously. And there are just a lot of kids that are kind of falling through the cracks there because they don't have someone kind of guiding them in how to read the emotion and work with it.
It must be so difficult for teenagers without support or working with someone like you, to actually recognize what is important to them as like an individual, rather than, oh my gosh, like what do I have to focus on? What's important for me to fit into these social circles that are so viciously um, they're very important, obviously, for a teenager,
Yeah.
to because of the school environment and peers and social groups and sports and all those things like this. I'd hate to be a teenager today. I'd hate it.
Wow.
But like, how do you go about helping them recognize what's important to their, like, I want to say, true, authentic self,
Mhm.
rather than the personalities and identities that they feel they need to fit into in order to, like, guide themselves through society and keep basically other people happy, rather than really focusing on their own happiness?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And you nailed it when you said that it is important to recognize that social referencing is the thing that they do at that age, right? Learning to connect socially, it's a developmental stage that they're moving through. So we're not fighting it as much as we're working with it and saying like, okay, in this setting, if connecting with other people is important to you, let's make sure the people you're connecting with are the people you want to be around. Who are the types of people you want to be around? Who are the types of people who make you feel capable, who make you feel confident? It's building self-awareness mostly around like how they feel in certain settings. And is that the kind of feeling you want to have? Like, do you feel, will one of the activities that we do is like a candle activity. And I think it was Brene Brown, and she talks about like be around people who fan your flame and don't blow it out. Right. And so do you feel creative? Do you feel open? Do you feel adventurous? Like, is the part of your brain that's ready for life turned on when you're around these people? Or do you feel small? Do you feel like you want to, kind of cower? Do you feel hesitant? And some kids, they're just going to be a little bit more quiet, right? And it's going to be harder for them to kind of put themselves out there. But even with those kids, they usually have a sensitivity where they can recognize, like, I don't feel comfortable in this situation, but maybe they're there because their friend is there and wanted them to be there, or they think they should be in this club, or and so I think it's really about helping them find the places they can thrive, because then when they make those connections, the connections are meaningful. They're based on values that child wants to perpetuate in their lives versus feeling pulled apart because they're in a situation where the values don't match what they're trying to be.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And obviously, just the relationships that you um, create, be that with peers or teachers, or even with your family members, so important and valuable to recognize, yeah, what is of value. I think a lot of adults seriously struggle with that, and they don't ever really get out of the patterns of their, like, teenage, high school ness, when
Yeah.
they're, just trying to get on with life and, kind of make other people happy, rather than recognizing, like, what's kind of like true to them, and are they, in circles of individuals that, enlighten them and motivate them and support them and care for them, rather than just trying to, like, satisfy this role that we believe we need to facilitate. Super
Yeah.
interesting. Do you have any examples of where, like, you're working with kids, and they end up really teaching their parents about like how, not just like how the kid is experiencing like their stress or how they want to deal with it, but like opening the parents' eyes up to this whole process of using sensory development and all these other like tools to be able to develop with that kind of mindfulness in the home.
Yeah, yeah, that's another good question. So, one of the things that I try to do with the kids that I work with is make them the mindfulness expert in their home. So, we gear the activities toward being family friendly, something they could share with their family or talk about with their family. So, one example that I can share is the empathy flashlight. So, I have these little finger lights. And I'll send kids a package, and we'll have activities based on these we'll do something on the call based on the things I send in the package. So this activity is called the empathy flashlight. And first they shine the light on themselves to see what's going on with themselves. So like, what am I feeling right now? What's going on with me? Then they shine the light outside of them, like what relational things are going on right now, what's happening in my home, like the environment that I'm in or school, and then make a choice on purpose from there. So what's going on inside of me, what's going on outside of me, make a choice on purpose. So in family life, it's been interesting because kids can use that empathy flashlight example and they'll be like, I think you need to get your empathy flashlight out. Or, they can hand the parent the empathy flashlight and say like, can you just listen to me right now? Because sometimes as parents, it can be easy for us to kind of gloss over kids' worries or, make it seem like it's small in comparison to what we're worried about. But for kids, these worries are a big deal, and if they're feeling frustrated or angry or upset, then it's an opportunity for them to hand over the flashlight and ask the parent, like, please have empathy for me right now. Like, shine this on me. Let's focus on what I'm talking about. So that's one that's fun and that kids have used in family settings to kind of just perpetuate this culture of mindfulness where we take seriously what other people are expressing and communicating. We don't judge it. We're neutral with it and gentle with it. And then we make a choice on purpose, given everyone's different perspectives and needs. So in family life, that's really fun because a lot of times parents, they resonate with that too, right? Like adults having an empathy flashlight, sometimes we get burned out and we need to turn our empathy flashlight off for a while, and we need to just have a minute where we don't have it on and we're not constantly worrying about other people. So moms will really connect with that one and be like, oh, I'm on empathy flashlight burnout right now. I need a break.
Yeah, and it's just, like we're talking about like young humans that are having to deal with huge, big emotional states. And like, I'm 38, so I have 38 years of experience with happiness, with anger, with rage, with, judgment, like all of these very, very powerful things that can change our biochemistry instantaneously. I have I have quite a lot of experience with those things. But for a young human being that's just like basically just running on frequency and energy anyway, to experience those things and not have the tools to be able to like recognize, understand, and digest those things, like without that support, so challenging. And I love that you said you want what did you say, you wanted the children to become like the mindfulness expert in the house? Like, I just, all I hear when you say that is like responsibility. And I think that's so unbelievably valuable and important for, any age, but especially like as soon as like kids are able to actually start taking responsibility within the household. Is that something that you attempt to instill in this program?
Yeah, I definitely do. Because a lot of times the kids that find me tend to be, or the families that find me, they'll have a child who tends to be a bit more sensitive. So like we're just talking about how emotions are running high anyway for any child anywhere. But for kids who tend to be more sensitive, it's like turning up the volume, times 9, right? And the emotions are just like flying through them and they're feeling all of it. All the things you're feeling are coming to them. All the things, in the world are kind of finding them. And they're just like Velcro for anything that's any emotion, And so for those kids, a lot of times emotion is something they struggle with because they're easily overwhelmed. They easily have meltdowns. And it's something that emotion feels like a weakness and a vulnerability. And one of my goals whenever I'm working with kids is to help them transform those weaknesses or perceived weaknesses into strengths. So we talk about that. We talk about what's the flip side of this sensitivity look like for you? It means you're extremely compassionate. It means you really know your body. It means you can connect with other people with ease. So let's harness the good things about being sensitive, the strengths about being sensitive, and let's focus on those and use mindfulness to help us move through the parts that make you extra vulnerable. And so we openly have conversations around that so that they feel like this isn't something that's wrong with me, right? And I think a lot of times in mental health, we've given kids this picture that if you struggle with emotion, something's wrong with you. If you aren't, if you get angry all the time, something's wrong with you. And it's really just a matter of, like you said, not knowing how to manage that much emotion. And so if we can say, hey, this is actually a strength, you having these qualities means this, this, and this, we're going to focus on harnessing those strengths because those are important and you need those in your life. And as a world, we need you to show up with those, like those are going to be things that are going to help us innovate. They're going to create more compassionate solutions at, in workplaces. They're going to create more connections and friendships. Like those are qualities we need as a people. So let's not let them get buried under like just this overwhelming emotion that actually just comes with them. So because emotion comes with them, let's figure out how to manage that so that these qualities can be what shines. And kids resonate with that because they don't want to feel overwhelmed and they don't want to feel weak and they don't want to feel like something's wrong with them. So if we can help them to reframe it and see that this is actually just a byproduct of you having these other strengths, then we can help them leverage mindfulness in a way that lets the strengths shine.
Yeah, that's just awesome. I love that, everything you're saying right now. So cool. Do you find that a lot of parents struggle to find the time to work on these things? Like my wife and I have decided that we're going to. I have a 1.5 and a 3-year-old, so I'm like in it. It's hardcore.
Yeah.
It's like serious. I've just got these two beautiful, small,
Tiny
emotional,
people.
energetic people. Right. And it's hard. It's difficult because I've obviously we've got our own stuff going on. And I really want to make sure that, I'm taking care of myself as an individual. I'm taking care of my marriage, but I'm also trying to be a parent. And I've got these hats. And we made this decision. We're going to do this like gentle parenting technique, because I recognize that my 3-year-old is just like, he doesn't have the experience with emotion that I do. And like, he is going to have rage and anger in ways that, he's going to express himself when it just like gets too much,
Yeah.
And I've just reckoned that's okay. That's part of development. That's part of process. And the worst thing I can possibly do is match that rage and anger with my own rage and anger, because my expectation of him dealing with emotions should be the same as a middle-aged man. Like, it's absurd. Absurd. But we like 99%
so
of
lucky
parents.
that you're his dad.
Well, thanks. But like 99% of parents like hold these small balls of madness to the same standards that they would like their best friend or something. It's mad. And it's been difficult to like make that transition because when you're tired and you are unable to like be mindful, and you're unable to be like in the present moment and maybe select a different thought process or a different emotional state, it can be very difficult. And I don't think anyone does it perfectly all the time, so we should have some self-forgiveness there. But like I find it difficult to sometimes find the time to match this approach of being a gentle parent and being there for my child and being super patient with them, and just trying to find the extra time to like help educate myself to like how I can progress and develop. Like I just really struggle to find the time to be able to add that extra layer of education on the process that we've decided.
Yeah, 100%. And you're like 99% of the parents out there who are trying to change their parenting right now. It's hard, and not to negate the struggle on your, like on your end, but there's so many parents trying to learn it and teach it and live it at the same time. And it is rough. And one of the reasons, like I have my podcast, the Stress Nanny Podcast, is to give little snippets, like little tools every week that you can use, just to take this tool and use this, or take this conversation and take something from it and make it so that you can have one more thing in your week that makes that process a little bit smoother. But I think one thing that I always encourage parents to do, and this is probably something you've adopted in your own life, but just take 2 minutes to breathe, right? Like wherever you are, like in the morning when you roll out of bed, maybe you got a crying kid and you can't do it right then. Maybe it's on your way to work. Maybe it's, before you eat your breakfast, you just sit and breathe for a couple minutes. Whatever time you can fit it in, try to find a consistent time to just take the 2 minutes. it makes such a world of difference. And a lot of parents are like, 2 minutes, like the problems that I have, the stress that I'm facing, 2 minutes is going to do nothing for me. Like, this is a ridiculous solution. But the simplicity of it's like a gift. So take the simplicity not as a sign that it doesn't work, but as a gift for busy parents. Like, it's so easy to just breathe for 2 minutes and just let that nervous system settle. Because really what we're trying to do in those moments, and what we're trying to do over the life of our children, right, is we're trying to be the strongest nervous system in the room. So if we can help to like bring our nervous system down, I like to do in the morning because it makes me start from a calm space. And for me, it's easier to find calm throughout the day if I've accessed it early. So if I can breathe and settle my nervous system and get into parasympathetic dominance, is what that's called. First thing, I can find parasympathetic dominance later on with some breathing. But if the day starts and I'm just like in complete, like fight or flight mode, and I'm just running around and my kids are crying and I feel like I've got 15 things to do and I'm supposed to be here 10 minutes ago and I haven't even eaten breakfast yet or take a drink of water. Like, if all those things are weighing on me, it's harder to find that steady state. But it's kind of like, there's a graphic I love where it's this big wave. So if our kids are these emotions, these big waves, we're like the calm water. So if we can be the calm water and then these big waves hit the calm water, they're going to even out. Right. And so just do a few things a day to help yourself be the calm water. And that's going to do wonders for you in your ability to respond with calm and patience, because you're hacking your nervous system. You're getting to a place of parasympathetic dominance. And then like let the experience be the teacher. But if we're just trying to read and we're like, I have to read more about mindfulness, I got to listen to Lindsay's podcast so I can learn more. Like, you'd be much better served if it's a choice between listening to my podcast and breathing for 2 minutes, go breathe for 2 minutes, and it's going to do a world of good.
Yeah, I think for me as a solution, I think podcasting is certainly the way to go. Like, it's something that my wife and I can do together, or even separately, or kind of, she listens to one, I listen to another, and we can like talk about it. Like, I think that there's always really the time there to do it. It's just like, you got to make these little kind of sacrifices, I suppose, in your day. Yeah, I don't feel like anyone's too busy to really do that type of thing, especially when it's obviously so unbelievably valuable, important, and you are, helping your children set their like foundational nervous system response. Response being the key word rather than reaction, right? So that's obviously a big thing. In your experience with like the school system and school structure and school curriculum, do they fail? Do they succeed in regards to like empathy, development, mindfulness, support? Like, these things are obviously so important.
You're asking such good questions. It depends on the setting. I would love to be able to say that as a worldwide culture, we're knocking it out of the park when it comes to teaching kids mindfulness at school. I don't think that's the case. I think there are places where mindfulness is being taught and implemented in really effective ways. I think the trouble comes, and this is probably the majority of cases, unfortunately, when the people teaching mindfulness aren't also practicing it. And kids have a big like fake meter, right?
Yeah.
Like, they can read fake really quickly. So if you're in a setting where there's a classroom, I was talking to some kids the other day and the teacher had said, oh, stinks to be you. You really did bad on that test, to one of the kids. And I was like, and if that that teacher may have been having a bad day, whatever, but that I don't believe in treating children that way. And so if that teacher was then at the end of the day encouraging the children to have a mindful moment where they could cultivate empathy and compassion, like, we're not actually teaching mindfulness. Right. If we're not walking the walk, we're like talking the talk doesn't matter. And so I think what we're doing is well-intentioned in schools in large measure, and we're trying to give them information, but what they need is experience. They need experience with mindfulness. And that's where I think we're failing them.
Yeah, I mean, because like teachers could go, I'm sure there are many schools around the world that get people in to educate the teachers in regards to what they can do or what they can say or what they can present to kids to help open up the idea of mindfulness and de-stressing and all these things. But Yeah, you said it perfectly in regards if those teachers aren't actually like they shouldn't be showing the information. They should be doing like a weekend class where they're doing it for themselves, where they're able to actually recognize and do the practices and see and feel how it actually works and changes. That sounds like the much more effective approach.
Yeah. Yeah. And to be fair, there are some teachers who are doing an incredible job of this. I mean, I've seen teachers who I mean, it's really truly a work of art, their classroom environment, the culture they're creating. So I don't want to downplay at all the
Yeah.
teachers who have really, like you said, taken it and run with it and implemented it from like an experiential way. Because they exist. And I'm so fortunate, when I run into them or when my child is with them or, in different settings where we find them. And I think those teachers need to be elevated to a status of training, hosting the weekend workshops for their school or their district or, having a leadership position so that kind of influence has a trickle down effect into all the other spaces that the kids occupy in the school setting.
Have you seen examples of teachers or schools creating maybe like departments where they do have like a good way to help kids deal with those stressful moments? And are there any like, say for example, you're the headmistress of the world, and you can create like a department for this? Is there like, so I don't want to say like quick fixes, but they're like things you could get in there now, like like breathing, for example, would be a real simple like way to get that in. So do you have any like examples for that?
Yeah, 100%. There are spaces in schools, in some schools where they have like a yoga room. So if at any point during the day the child is feeling overstimulated, overwhelmed, they can go into this yoga room. There are like cushions, mats, pillows. There's some meditation, like a little corner with meditation cards. We have things like little sand timers and things like that, like just soothing kind of activity or experiential um, tools you can use to settle. And giving kids the autonomy to access spaces like that is important. And there will be some kids who will maybe test boundaries around it. But for the most part, kids recognize that that place is a privilege and they don't want to mess up being able to access it, right?
Yeah.
So having a space like that, having it manned with someone who has mindfulness skills, who could offer, support at that time. I think that those are fantastic spaces. I've seen ones that they have books for the kids, and they recognize they have to, make up whatever work they miss if they step out of class for a moment to go into that room. But if they're dealing with something really heavy, like a grandparent has passed away, or, their parents are getting a divorce, or there's just stuff coming up for them that they can't control when it hits them. If they have a space they can go to process it, it's not going to be like trying to hold a beach ball underwater for the whole rest of the day, right? They're
Yeah.
going to be able to move through it. So I think that's fantastic. I've seen schools do groups, which I think is wonderful too, where there's group-based opportunities for kids to get together, especially in those middle school and high school years, to discuss mindfulness principles and how they apply. So giving them the chance to say, like, this is our worry group. If you feel like worry is kind of overwhelming you and carrying you away a lot, come to our worry group and we're going to share some tools that you can use to help you manage that. And again, it normalizes it. It helps them see other kids have worries too, and it's just a matter of figuring out how to work with it. So I think creating like a space either in the classroom itself. I've seen classrooms have like a calm down corner where kids are able to go and just kind of take a minute if they need it in the classroom. Sometimes that's hard because there's other stuff going on. And if they really need the isolation and like the sensory deprivation for a minute,
Yeah.
it's helpful to remove themselves from the room. But even something as simple as that, it gives kids a chance to take a minute. I have mixed feelings about doing breathing with kids like on a large scale, because I think there are some kids who really embrace it and love it. But if the teacher tries to like tell everyone to do a specific breathing exercise at the beginning of class, like I don't know how it's going to go. But if she says, hey, we're going to take 2 minutes, do the thing in these next 2 minutes that helps you relax and feel calm within these parameters, right? Like boundary the experience. But here are a few breathing options for you if if you want to try out breathing. Because I think sometimes what we do too is we make mindfulness really prescriptive and we say this is a thing that's going to help you for sure. Now, I mean, I can look at the nervous system and say breathing and calming down your heart rate and your stress response, that's definitely going to help you, right? But for kids, teaching them the awareness, like what works for you, that is helpful. And it gives them ownership and independence to use the tools in a way that works for them and to recognize when they need them and what works, at a certain time.
Yeah, and just for the kids to just know that there is a space, that they are supported, they are like being listened to, not just verbally, but their body language and their emotions are being like catered to as well. So important. And if I was involved in an educational institute that was really, really dedicated to educating children and getting results, it would only make sense to me that there would be practices in place, whether that would be a space or a practice in the classroom, which allows children to get into a particular mental state that is beneficial for learning. Because if a kid's stressed, or a kid is thinking about the school bully, or is thinking about the big game at the weekend or something, that they're just not going to be present. They're not going to be able to learn, and it's literally a complete waste of time to try and educate those individuals in that space. So yeah, I love the idea of like a teacher giving everybody a couple of minutes to like transition from, like whether it's the first class of the day or the fifth class of the day, whatever. Like I
Mhm.
have to transition from family time to come into work, because
Mhm.
I have to do something. It's usually an ice cold bath or something, usually for me. But like so important to be able to like have that process, so we're not just like viciously overlapping all of the stuff that happens to a kid during a school day. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's clearly some very simple ways that we can benefit. And yeah, I mean, I've not been in school for a long period of time. I was a preschool teacher about 15 years ago, but I don't know what they're doing these days. But it's yeah, I hope that there's a little bit more focus on creating these like good educational nervous system spaces, and also teaching them about what the nervous system is properly, and how you can regulate it and what it does, what it's there for. Like it's mind-blowing to me the amount of conversations I have with adults that couldn't tell me like what anything about their nervous system. They could probably say brain or whatever, but like to be able to explain like how it works, and like maybe your vicious uh work schedule and all these things that you're trying to do, has got something to do with the fact that you've got digestive issues and you can't sleep, and like putting these things
Yeah.
together. But like, so I'm not sure like how they're teaching this in biology, but certainly connecting the dots in regards to thoughts, emotions, taking that mindfulness practice, and like what that actually means within your biology.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope for that also. I'm not seeing that as much as I would like to, that synthesis yet. Um, and I love, yeah, like I love the way that you highlight those different things, in your show and in the work that you do, because I think that bringing a more holistic view of the body and the brain online is crucial to these conversations with kids, because a lot of times we're trying to manage or control behaviors that have other roots, right? Like there's a root cause that's going completely unaddressed, and we're trying to mandate a behavior, or band-aid something that could be resolved in a much more efficient way.
Yeah, and if I'm an adult and I'm struggling to have empathy and patience and space for my child, then I try and go and educate 30 people who aren't my family. Like, it's gonna be very difficult for me to get into the mind frame to have empathy for 30 different individuals. It's almost an impossible task. Um, I want to ask you. Oh, I've got so many questions. I'm gonna go with the parents and like resistant parents to like the whole process. Do you
Mhm.
get a lot of that? Is it usually like one parent is like, not quite on board in regards to, oh, my kid doesn't need to like meditate or be mindful. They're just 7 and mental. What's how like do you have like resistant parents?
Yeah, for sure. And a lot of times I think, and I like to say they're discerning, right? I mean, because if you're going to invest time, energy, and money in something, you want to make sure that it's a good fit. And so I think that being discerning about mindfulness is always a good idea. I think the resistance often comes in lack of understanding. And most of the time, once we can address all the different ways that mindfulness supports healthy development, we get a little bit more buy-in from parents. So when we talk about it in terms of like, so this 12-year-old that you have now who's constantly having, altercations with siblings at school, like that 12-year-old is going to, in 6 or 7 years be going to get a job or going to college. Mindfulness is an intervention that is shown to support, solid relationships, support collegiate learning, support workplace success, right? Like these are skills that your child is eventually going to need. Now, you can put up with this behavior for now and just it can drive you crazy for the next 6 years, and then you can leave your child to kind of sort through it on their own when they launch. Or we can start to help them work through tools now. You can be an active part of the process of teaching this and prepare them for these moments that are inevitably going to come with the tools that they need to be successful in those moments. And a lot of times, once parents see it in more of a big picture way, they can access, a different level of support for it. Because mindfulness, I mean, again and again, the research is showing so many benefits to it, and with very few drawbacks, right? Very few side effects. There are some kids for whom mindfulness is not a good solution, but it's a very small subsector of the population. And so there's a lot of research that points to mindfulness as a fantastic intervention. And once parents kind of attune to that and get away from like thinking it's kind of a woo-woo spiritual practice only, and we can connect to the nervous system and all the implications of having a mellowed out nervous system, then they're like, oh, yeah, this does seem like a good solution,
Yeah, because the whole like generation, the different ways you were parent from generation
Yeah.
to generation, and we're still trying to break and crack through that, right? In regards to, especially like with men and emotions and not being and not showing
Yeah.
them, like I think we're like making waves, but like it's taking a lot of time. What does the actual science say in regards to mindfulness in kids specifically? Has there been like a lot of research done?
Yeah, it's a growing body of research. Dan Siegel is one of my favorite researchers for mindfulness, and he's done a ton of work around mindfulness for kids. Mark Brackett has research on emotion, which is fantastic. But yeah, Dan Siegel, his work, it shows, kids can improve in focus, they can improve in self-awareness, their relational skills are heightened, their communication skills are enhanced. Like mindfulness can bring online like their whole brain. So when kids are super emotive and frustrated and overwhelmed, they're only working with like the part of their brain that manages that. But when we can help them tether to the logical part of their brain and then use their prefrontal cortex, we really do bring on all their problem solving abilities, and we help them make decisions with like the entirety of their brain. And so if your little one is struggling, do you want them to just be making decisions with this like out of control, feeling part of their brain that has very limited experience with management? Or do you want it to be tethered to the prefrontal cortex where all of their managerial capabilities come online? And so, the research shows that when we can practice mindfulness and really bring that prefrontal cortex online, kids make better decisions and they have better relationships because they're in a place where they can connect intentionally, like use emotion as information, and then keep moving forward instead of getting stuck and kind of just like rolling, getting on a hamster wheel with it and just spinning in the same emotion over and over again. They can like shift it into momentum forward.
Beautiful. You mentioned a couple of authors there. Do you have any like podcasts, and certainly talk about yours as well, but podcasts or books to like recommend as like a starting point for this?
Yeah, there are so many. Dan Siegel's The Whole Brain Child book is fantastic. If you're a parent looking to try to implement some more mindfulness into your world, there's the American Institute of Stress has a great podcast. There's my podcast, The Stress Nanny. There are a lot of parenting podcasts designed for parents who are trying to break generational patterns. So if you search that, you can find quite a few in that genre. There are the Mom Hour is a great podcast to listen to. There are also a lot of apps that are helpful. One app that I really, really love, and it's only available on Apple right now, is called How We Feel. And it's by Mark Brackett, and he's a leading emotion researcher. The app is free, and it allows you to just go in and like twice a day, you go in and select the emotion that you're feeling. You say who you're with, what you're doing, how much sleep you got, how much exercise you got. And then it gives you analytics. So it'll analyze like, oh, it looks like when you get more than 7 hours of sleep, you have higher energy emotions. Or it looks like when you're around these people, you're having lower energy emotions. And so it's a really quick way. It takes 30 seconds to check in. It'll send you a notification. You check in once a day, twice a day, and then you get the analytics from it that can inform your decisions moving forward in a really, really powerful way. So I would say if you're going to spend, again, it's 30 seconds twice a day. So 1 minute, spend 2 minutes breathing, spend 1 minute on Mark Brackett's app, and those 3 minutes will change your life.
Oh, that's so good. Thank you so much for those recommendations. That's really cool. Can you let us know how people can connect with you, please?
Yes. So again, my podcast is The Stress Nanny. It's available on all podcast platforms. I have an Instagram at The Stress Nanny, and my website is thestressnanny.com. I work with kids and adults to implement solutions that are mindfulness and research based to manage stress more seamlessly and skillfully. And yeah, I have different workshops that I do, and I'm working on an online course right now, but it's not live yet. But each week I have a meditation and mindfulness class for adults where I teach like how to meditate, how to use mindfulness in a really practical way in an adult life so that you can then feel a little bit more taken care of and confident about, approaching mindfulness with your kiddos.
Lindsay, you're awesome. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Simon. It's been a pleasure. And thanks for all the work you're doing in the world.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Well, I will make sure that all those links to connect with Lindsay are in the show notes. Some super information available. I'm also going to put some links to some books and the app as well, so you can get quick access to that. But that is it for this episode of True Hope Podcast, the official podcast of True Hope Canada. We'll see you next week.